Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to San Bernardino Zoo, where today we're going to be building a walkthrough without using the enormous guest gate. Yes, that's right. This gate is way too big. It looks like something out of Jurassic Park, hence the intro, and we are not going to be using it. So what we're going to be doing is building our own much smaller custom gate, and then I'll show you how to use it to get a working walkthrough habitat for the wallabies. So back in the Australian area, we are building a little gate to start the walkthrough area. This is based on a gate at a small zoo here in the UK that I found in an amazing new tool by the wonderful Mr. Weasel. If you're not familiar with Mr. Weasel, he built the incredible Wild America's Zoo that we toured last year, which is one of the most popular zoo tours on the channel. And a few days ago, he messaged me and told me about a tool he's created for Planet Zoo, which is basically an inspiration website. He's compiled thousands of his own photos of zoos all over the UK and some of the rest of the world as well. And they are all tagged with various things, so you can search for, say, any photos of walkthrough habitats, any photos of penguin exhibits, photos with climbing, all sorts of stuff like that. It is an amazing tool. There is a link to it in the description. I would highly recommend it. And a big thank you to Mr. Weasel for sending it to me. So I dove straight into it and got the idea for this gate from one of the zoos, or one of the photos of the zoos on that website. It's mainly made with the smallest of the little branch pieces that we have, the birch branches, just to give it a really nice effect. And as you can see, this little gate is going to be a much more realistic size than the enormous guest gate, and it works perfectly. The only thing it doesn't do is open and close, but it's a small price to pay for having not only a much more realistically sized gate at the start of the walkthrough, but also a unique one rather than just having the exact same guest gate on every walkthrough habitat that you build. So we'll get on to how to get it to work in a second. First, we need to finish making it look good, adding some details in with the hinges, putting some larger posts on the side so that the doors have something to swing from. This isn't where it's going to be built, by the way. This is just where I started to build it. The actual walkthrough itself is going to be here. So we've got two of the gates, and the way to get it to work is you just take any normal barriers, get them as close to the path where the gate is going to be as possible, and then start putting them where you want the habitat to go. And when you get to the path, just switch it out for a null barrier and run that across the path, and then go back to whichever barrier you want to use. Obviously, you can do the whole thing with null barriers and build your own barriers if you like, but for a change, I'm actually going to use one of the in-game barriers here because I really like this chain link fence. It's nice and simple, and it's pretty much what we want for this kind of habitat. And then we just keep running this round. It's going to be pretty sizable, but not too big. The wallabies are only small after all. And then we get as close as possible again to the path, and use a final null piece of barrier to join them together. We'll put some of the Australian logs on each of the fence posts to make it look a bit more exciting and a bit more individual, and then we're going to do something a bit more intricate than that. So as well as the zoo from Mr. Weasel's website that I based this on, I was also looking at the Wallaby walkthrough at the Yorkshire Wildlife Park. And one thing you often see with walkthroughs is hand sanitizers and disinfectants and things like that. So I decided to make a little soap dispenser that goes on the outside for the guests to use before they get into the habitat. So we're just using a few of the bracket pieces from the base game here. This is some old school Planet Zooing here, what people used to build everything out of before most of the DLCs came out, but they work perfectly for this soap dispenser. They're white, they're plastic, and they're basically the right shape. So we'll just use a few of these to get the exact shape of the soap dispenser that I was looking at in Yorkshire Wildlife Park. I had a lot of fun doing this. And then we're going to use one of the, I think it's the New World light bulb, to get the sort of red see-through plastic button that you push to actually make the hand sanitizer come out. So we'll get this into the right position, just sink that into the brackets, make it the right color. It was red in the one that I was looking at, and then we need to turn it off, obviously, so it's not actually lighting up the surrounding area. And that's the soap dispenser done. Next we'll work on the gates themselves and get the join between the gates that the guests are going to walk through and the fences. So I'm going to bring this fence out so that it's touching the front gate, again as close to the path as possible, and then we will bring it down and get it to actually meet the height of the gate so it sort of bridges the gap between the gates and the fence. We need a name for the habitat as well. We're going to call it the Wallaby Walkabout. I thought that was a nice Australian sounding name. I'll resist the temptation to do a terrible Australian accent at this point, for which I'm sure many of you will be grateful, especially my Australian viewers. But that is going to be the name. We'll do a nice little sign with that on it later, which is going to go on top of this entrance here. We'll just finish putting these Australian logs around. I tried those sort of decorated Australian logs on the posts, but they were a bit much, I thought, so I'll get rid of those in a second. We just put the keeper gate in as well, as normal, like you would with any other habitat. Doesn't really matter where that goes, just wherever's convenient. And then we'll start working on that sign that I mentioned. So this one's going to look dead simple to begin with, but we're going to do something that makes it look a lot cooler a bit later on. Once we've got the basics of that underway, we're going to grab one of the big pieces of Australian forest that we created at the start of the area and drag that in here and use this as a base to start getting the foliage on the outside of the habitat in order to get something immersive before the guests even get in there. We're almost ready to start the inside of the walkthrough now, but before we do that, I've got something to show you. This is the brand new food court in our Australian area. Big thank you to one of you guys, Samwise Jenkins, for suggesting the shipping container motif. I built this off camera because it's pretty simple, but when you're in franchise mode, you need stuff like this all over the zoo. And I actually copied most of this from a real Australian shipping container that had been converted, which is a great way to save yourself from having to come up with a million different food court ideas. All right, onto the inside of the habitat. The first thing to do is get a fence going. So this fence is not to keep anything in or out. In fact, we need the wallabies to be able to get underneath it so they can access the path and get to the different parts of the habitat. Its main purpose is to tell the guests not to leave the path. Not in game, obviously, they can only walk on the paths, but IRL, that's what the fence is there for. Really, it's a signifier that you should stay on the path and then let the animals go wherever they want. So we're using again the sort of really simple wooden fence that we made for the Asian water monitor habitat. I just really like this fence. They're my favourite wood pieces, and I'd struggle to make a better one than this, or one I liked more than this, without just using those same pieces again. We'll line the edges of the path with some grunge decals that we've coloured the same as the path. It takes a while to do, but it's so worth it to make the edges of the path less sort of obvious. You can see I've continued our original dots motif as well that we started in the koalas. That's going to go everywhere. And then one of the other things that I saw in a lot of the walkthroughs in Chester Zoo were these mats covered in detergent that you walk over to get into the habitats to protect the animals and get any germs off your shoes, basically. So we're going to use these Indian carpets, sink them down so that the frills on the edges don't show, and then just clone one of them. And that's pretty effective. That looks pretty much how I want it. We're going to cover this sign that we did earlier with some of the bark pieces to give it a much more interesting texture, so it's not just that same Australian sign we've been using since the Australia pack came out. And then we're going to curve these fences. This is something else I like to do. It looks really natural. If you set the beginning of the curve to 25 degrees and the end of the curve to minus 25 degrees, you get a really nice look. And then we're going to swap the entrance and the exit, because I worked out that the guest flow is going to be way better that way. So we'll just put a few stop signs on that one there to signify that it's the exit. Now, as you can see here, one of the issues with building right up to the edge of the zoo is the view. There is a whole lot of car park out there to look at, and that's not really what we want to see when we're going around the Wallaby Walkabout. So what I'm going to do is build a rock wall here to cover that up, so basically you don't see any of the car park. We don't have to do this all the way around the habitat. It's kind of cool to have views into other parts of the zoo. I love how you can see the Balinese archway from loads of different spots. That's really cool. But a car park, nah. That's not what we want. So I'm going to build a rock wall here. I'm going to build this out of actual rocks. We've been using a lot of the stalagmites and the faux trees recently. So with this one, I want to build this mainly out of the savanna and the desert rocks, and then we'll chuck a few of the stalagmites and the faux trees a bit later. This is based on I think it's called the Colohoon Forest in Australia, in Victoria. I may have completely murdered the pronunciation there, but I just saw a really nice sort of cliff edge with foliage on top of it and some really nice rocks. And I decided to use that as an influence for this, seeing as it's an Australian forest that we've got going on here. So I've made one section, flipped it around and cloned it, and then we're going to move some of the rocks around to make it look nice and different so it doesn't look copy-pasted. And once that's done, we'll use this to build the basis of the rock wall. So we'll copy this one down into the corner here, copy it all the way across that back wall. And then for interest, we're going to put some mulch in the top and then plant some bushes and some ferns and things like that in the top here so that it's not just a bare rock wall. We're also going to put some plants in the front of the wall as well, identify a few sort of nooks and crannies where plants could be growing and put them in there, and just try and get it to feel as natural as possible, like something the zoo spent a lot of time on, a lot of time making. This is the first plant that we're going to put in at the front, one of the deserts or sort of dry bushes from the Arid Animal Pack, which I really like. A couple of really good ones in there, and one that isn't so dry that's possibly even better. We're going to use that a lot throughout the zoo. And then, like I said, we're gonna chuck in a few of the fake tree trunks, just like this. Once we get the colour right, that just adds a little bit of interest and alternate sort of texture to the wall. And the same thing with the stalagmites, just so it doesn't look like a pile of flat rocks. Really get some texture and some difference in depth to it. That's starting to look really nice. We'll put a few plants on top of it just to give an extra layer of interest and a bit more variety to it, so it's not just the sort of sandy brown rocks. I really like this grass piece. I've used this a hell of a lot. It looks great like this, where you've got the sort of spikes on it, and then if you can just sink it in as well, so you just see the top bits. It gives a more generic grass look, which is also good. So I've done a lot of both of those. Got some of these vines in as well, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. That is that's the rock wall pretty much done. We'll copy that to the other side as well, but then sink it way down like this. We don't need to be blocking out the view here. It just makes the fence look more interesting. And then we're going to drop in one of the stables that we built for the desert house. We need to modify it a lot. Obviously, this is going to be for wallabies, not for oryx, but we're going to make some really cute little doors here. I really didn't think these doors would work with the hitboxes in the game, but the wallabies can get in and out of here. They look really cute as they hop in and out. So very pleased with that. We'll move these down because we're going to have a new use for those in a second. And then we'll rotate this into place and move the fences a bit so that it's not sort of clipping through the fence. And this will give enough shelter for the wallabies. Then we'll start copying round more of the forest that we built and just keep modifying it, getting rid of trees, so it's mainly just the grass or the various different types of grass. I think I've used about 10 different types of grass in this little patch here, just to give us a really interesting look and try and match it up fairly well with the Australian forests I saw. We don't really have that much Australian or Australasian plants in the game. There's a lot of trees that I saw where we don't really have an equivalent, so it relies pretty heavily on the ghost gum tree. It is almost time to get the wallabies into the build. Just a couple more things to take care of. Firstly, the habitat sign. So I want a really nice rustic kind of sign that's going to sit really nicely into this habitat. So what we're going to do is take the habitat board and then start surrounding it with the bark pieces, and be really careful about where we put these so we get a really nice edge. It's not so much the inside that I'm looking at here, it's the outside. Make sure that that is looking really good, and then we will move all of them behind the sign, and we end up with the sign just being surrounded like it's on this old sort of driftwoody kind of wood. We'll recolor the sign, and there we go. I really like the way that looks. And then finally, we need to continue the Aboriginal dot motif all the way around this path, and we can get the wallabies in. Let's check them out. Here's the entrance. I think it looks so good in the morning sun like this. It's so much better than the standard guest gate. And then we'll move up into the habitat and check out the walkthrough itself. I'm really happy with the sort of forested look here. Looks really lush without being tropical, which I like. So many different types of grass, so definitely worth it. And the wallabies are just so cute. They are really enjoying this habitat. They've got so much space. They can go under all the fences into each different part of the habitat, and they can even get through those little doors into their shelter. We've got 6 wallabies in here at the moment. I bought 4 on the market, and the 2 females have had a baby each already. The joeys are even cuter than the adults, as you would expect. There's one now. And yeah, I don't know how many I'm planning on having altogether, maybe 12 or something like that. I built it big enough to have quite a large group of them. But yeah, just really happy with how this one looked. I really hope you guys liked it. This is where we started today, as always, in the drone cam. And this is where we are now. This Australian area is really starting to fill up. I think we've got, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 more habitats to build in this area, one of which I've already started, which is going to be very different from what we've seen so far. Thank you for watching as always, and I'll see you next week for some more San Bernardino Zoo.